1, 2. Audio check 3, 4. Check 1, 2. 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 Check 1, 2.
Check. Hello, hello. Check 1, 2.
Agenda room test. Check, 1, 2.
Commissioner,
Good morning, Commissioner. We hear you.
thank you.
Yes, it's afternoon. Yeah. Have it. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Fine. No, are you the one that always gives me that? You're just
What is
no,
it?
the red starburst are good.
Oh, yeah.
The green makes it-
He always gets a green one. Somebody gives it to him. I don't know who it is.
the most green one now.
I should have brought my.
Oh, yes, you could.
Use mine.
Okay.
I can figure out how to work it.
Well, I'm glad I'm the only one who has a really hard time with those.
Yeah, well, I mean, this
Judge, you are.
They're all
in charge of the-
is pretty funny.
It's unmuted and it is streaming.
Okay, excellent. So,
Oh,
everything,
there we
yeah.
are, right there.
Those are back on. Okay, great. All the commissioners are assembled in the agenda room or on the line. And so we will go ahead and call to order the meeting for the Missouri Public Service Commission weekly agenda meeting. Today is July 26, 2023. Before we begin, I would ask all those that are participating or listening in online to please mute your phones unless you are required to speak, so as not to distract other people that are listening in. And there are 4 tariffs new orders today and 1 case discussion. But before we jump into that, we have 2 things to do. First, I want to acknowledge that we are live streaming the agenda meeting again. That was a process that we always did. And then when COVID-19 came around and stuff, it was one of those things that we stopped doing due to the uniqueness of those months and months and months. But we've had some requests to go ahead and start that back up, and which we will gladly do. So that is being streamed via WebEx Online. You can go to the Public Service Commission's webpage and click on the link that is there, and you can watch online. And we will plan on continuing to do that here for our agenda meetings. The second thing we need to do before we jump in is we need to approve the minutes from the July 20th, 2023 agenda. I do know those have been distributed in advance. Commissioners, is there any questions, changes, or corrections to those minutes? All right, hearing none, then I would make the motion that we approve the minutes from the July 20th, 2023 agenda. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
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 Great, and that is approved by a vote of 5-0. All right, first up, tariffs and new orders. We have file number GX 2023-0422. This is in the matter of the proposed amendments of the Commission's rules relating to natural gas safety. The proposed amended rule updates Missouri's gas pipeline safety rules to adopt relevant changes to the federal pipeline safety rules. This rule was developed with input from the interested stakeholders and the Commission, and we will continue to seek further comments from other interested stakeholders during the whole entire rulemaking process. But what this order does is it directs the Secretary of the Commission to file the proposed rule with the Secretary of State for publication in the Missouri Register as a proposed rulemaking. And I recommend that we approve this order, version number 1. Commissioner Coleman,
I support the order.
Commissioner Holzman,
I'm in support of the order.
Commissioner Kokmeyer,
I'm in support.
Commissioner Hahn.
Also in support.
Great. All those in favor of supporting that order, version number 1, please say aye.
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 That is approved by a vote of 5-0. Next up, we have file number GF 2023-0280. This is the matter of Liberty Utilities, aka Mid-States Natural Gas Corp., DBA Liberty MNG, their application for authority to issue long-term unsecured debt. So back on March 7th, Liberty Mid-States filed an application with the commission requesting approval to refinance its unsecured debt to its parent company, Liberty Utilities Company, in the amount of $25.6 million. The debt will mature on May 1st, 2023. Liberty Mid-States also seeks approval to issue new long-term debt to Liberty Utilities Corp. of up to $65 million. Staff of the commission filed its recommendation that the commission approve the application subject to conditions. Liberty Mid-States then filed its response to staff's recommendation, in which they objected to one of the proposed conditions put forward by staff. Staff then later agreed that one contested recommendation or condition was not necessary to this application. So what this order does is it grants Liberty Mid-States financing application filed as amended May 19th. And Liberty Mid-States is authorized to refinance its unsecured debt to Liberty Utilities Company. And Liberty Mid-States is also authorized to issue new long-term debt to Liberty Utilities Company as specified in this application. And Liberty Mid-States refinancing and issue of debt is subject to the staff's conditions. And I recommend that we approve this order, version number 1. Commissioner Coleman,
I support the order.
Commissioner Holzman,
I'm in support of the order.
Commissioner Kokmeyer,
I'm in support of the order.
Commissioner Hahn.
Also in support.
Great. All those in favor of supporting that order, please say aye.
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 Commissioner Root, could you hear me?
I could not hear you, but I can hear you now. So your vote is,
Aye. There's a delay, it appears.
understand. We'll pause and until we hear you. So that is now, order is approved 5-0. Next up is file number ER 2023-0410. This is the matter of Evergy Metro, Inc., DBA Evergy Missouri Metro, for their demand side investment mechanism rider rate adjustment and true-up required by Missouri law. On June 2nd of 2023, Evergy Missouri Metro filed a tariff sheet or supporting testimony to adjust its charges related to its approved demand side investment mechanism, or the DSIM rider, under the Missouri Energy Efficiency Investment Act, or MEIA. On June 28th, the staff recommended that the commission approve Evergy Missouri Metro's tariff sheet. No responses or objections were received to either Evergy Missouri's Metro filing or staff's recommendations. So the proposed tariff sheet decreases the current residential DSIM rider rate for residential customers. So for a residential customer using 1,000 kilowatts, this change would decrease their bill by approximately $1.19 per month. And the proposed tariff sheet would also decrease the current residential DSIM rider rate for the small general service, medium general service, and large general service accounts, and will increase the DSIM rider rate for large power service by roughly 2 cents per 1,000 kilowatt hours. And I would recommend that we approve this order, version number 2. Commissioner Coleman,
I support the order.
Commissioner Holzman,
I'm in support of the order.
Mr. Kokmeyer.
I'm in support.
Supporting testimony to adjust charges related to its demand side investment mechanism rider under the Missouri Energy Efficiency Act. On June 28th, staff recommended the commission approve Evergy Missouri West tariff sheet. No responses or objections were received to either Evergy Missouri West's filing or staff's recommendation. So the proposed tariff sheet decreases the current residential DSIM rider rate for residential customers using around 1,000 kilowatts per hour. This will decrease the customer's bill by about 69 cents per month. And the proposed tariff sheet will decrease the current residential DSIM rider rate for the small general service, the large general service, and the large power service categories as well. And I recommend we approve this order, version number 3. Commissioner Coleman,
I support the order.
Commissioner Holden,
I'm in support of the order.
Commissioner Kolkmeyer,
I'm in support of the order.
Commissioner Hahn.
Also in support.
Great. All those in favor of supporting that order, please say aye.
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 That is approved by a vote of 5-0. All right, next up on our agenda is our case discussion. Today we have file number EA 2023-0017. This is Grainbelt's application for transmission line certificate, and Judge DePel.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I previously circulated a post-hearing discussion memo, sort of laying out the major issues that the commission needs to decide. If I can answer any questions, or if you just want to walk through those, or.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you for a very good order. Another complex issue. This is the 5th time this has been before us. And so I appreciate the memo that you put forward. I think it's probably easiest for us all to kind of just walk through the judge's memo. I think just starting by kind of some of the issues that we need to decide here today. I will kind of just probably run through. I think maybe I'll start with kind of the basic question of, granting the project and, should we grant the project, include the Tiger Connector and or allow it to be constructed in 2 phases. I'll probably just start off and kind of touch base on those issues. Maybe we'll go around and then continue on down the judge's memo and hit some of the other things there. So here we are again, 5 times, and this has been a vacillating issue that's gone back and forth. I think I've been here from the beginning. I think originally I voted no on the very first one. I didn't think there was a benefit for Missourians. They came back the second time and they were able to prove that, and I switched to a yes, and then we had some legal proceedings, and then we were back to a no, and then back to, so we've kind of been all over this. So I'm just going to kind of just maybe talk about my thoughts on this and just kind of where I'm ending up again at this final time. So I guess the first question before us, I get before I start too, is this is a new CCN application. I mean, this is something that is new before us, that we have to take all the evidence in, all the things from the hearing, everything, and we have to apply that to this decision for this new CCN application. So I guess the beginning question is, should the CCN be granted and include the Tiger Connector? Should it be allowed to be constructed in the 2 phases as the company has requested? At the end of the day, I came back to why was I against it in the very first time, and because there was not, in my opinion, the first time they came in, there wasn't a benefit to Missourians. The company was able to come back the second time, and they were able to show, through the contracts they had with Mudgemuck, which is now MEC, and stuff, that there would be a benefit to Missourians. And so as I looked at the evidence in this case and the increase in the megawatts in the new Tiger Connector line, I do believe the Grainbelt has met all the applicable Tartan factors, as discussed. I'll discuss here in a moment. But I do want to just verify that, the Tartan factors is not law. This is something that the commission staff had kind of come up with as a policy guideline for us on how to view these types of things. So, it's not something that has to be met, but it is a guide to us that we have used in other cases. And so I kind of went back to those factors. And just for those that are not aware, that are watching online or listening, those 5 factors are, there must be a need for the service. Second is that the application must be qualified to provide proposed service. The third is the applicant must have the financial ability to provide the service. And the fourth, the applicant's proposal must be economically feasible. And the 5th one, the service must promote the public interest. So going to the need for service, MECs, and formerly Mudgemucks, they provided information from their chief operating officer and the chief markets officer, where they had, an estimate savings by an independent study that they had done savings to MISO and MEC's customers of $1.1 billion, which is significant savings to those customers. I believe that the project is projected to lower energy and capacity cost in Missouri. I think it was projected to be 6.1% over the project, which is testimony said resulted in about $17.6 billion of savings for Missouri residents. Whether or not the $17.6 billion is real, I know there was some discussion on, factoring in, things of a potential carbon tax and things that were not there. So even if those numbers were reduced significantly, you're still looking at well over $1 billion of benefit to residents that is there. I think the interconnection capabilities with the Southwest Power Pool and PJM, the RTOs and ISOs there, I think that will provide Missouri ratepayers with some added potential insurance against extremely high energy prices in MISO and the catastrophic loss of load due to the connectivity. There was evidence presented in the hearings that there could be some national security implications to this project as well by the Department of Defense by hitting various different goals and supplying military installations with specific type of energy sought by the Department of Energy, plus the diversification of the sources of electricity. So that kind of solved the need for service. Was there a need for me? When I get into the economic feasibility piece, our previous order granting the grain belt, you relied that the business model the grain belt was assuming they're assuming the financial risk of this and building and operating the transmission line, and they should continue to bear the risk under this current application. I believe having the condition that construction will not begin until all the financing for each phase before construction begins on easement property in Missouri will help ensure that the project is economically feasible. So I am in favor of granting the two-phase building construction processes there. I believe that the company submitted a financial model that did show revenues in excess of the costs of the proposed 2,500 megawatt delivery in Missouri. And I believe there is significant interest in Kansas wind development. We saw lots of testimony and evidence of that, and just looking at the amount of gigawatts in the SPP's queue and historic every time a new transmission line is built, people flock to it with interest and stuff. I think that has been the history for that resource-rich area. I also think that the Inflation Reduction Act is going to continue to drive that continued investment, which will increase the demand. I think the company has a viable plan for raising the capital to construct each phase of the project. And I think breaking up the project into two phases may make the due diligence and the financing of phase two simpler and therefore possibly less costly. Allowing both the phases, I believe, will bring the benefits of the transmission line to Missouri customers sooner. And I think the company expects to be in a position to finance phase one in the near future. And then phase twos would mean, and thus the two phases would mean that Missouri customers will not have to wait for the phase two financing before construction of the first phase begins. So I think that's those things solve the economic, feasibility, pieces for me. Then we get into the public interest. I mean, I think I've stated some of the public interest in the previous comments, but in all things else being equal, this added transmission capacity to the power grid does improve reliability because it does create more numerous and robust energy pathways for sources of load, allowing more economic flow and increased available capacity during times of transmission and or generator outages. I touched on the national security piece, but we're also interconnecting 4 regions with black start capability and bidirectional capability. So this can make Grain Belt Express a restoration resource capable of restarting in the electric system from a shutdown condition upon if that were to happen. The amended project is stated, by the company to support 5,757 construction jobs statewide, with a significant number of those jobs in Missouri counties, as it crosses more than 104 long-term, it projects 104 long-term positions statewide. I do question the 5,757, since they assumed all of them would be in Missouri, which I think they were a little high on that and stuff. But even if you drop that number down to by 30-40%, it's still a significant amount of economic impact and construction jobs in the state that is there. And then also believe that the project does reduce the total energy and capacity expenditures for Missouri residents. I think I touched on the 17.6 billion or what that might be as well. And there was even some a testimony by a few witnesses that even could try to extrapolate Winter Storm Uri and the potential savings to SPP, MISO, and PJM. If the line were to have been in existence during those difficult winter storms, which seem to be not once in every 10-year occurrences anymore. So that kind of gets me to through the kind of the main first question of the judge before we get into any of the modifications. So I'll stop there and then pivot over to Commissioner Coleman for your thoughts on the first part of the judge's memo.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course, grain belt may be one of the most controversial matters to come before the commission in recent years. And you talked about how far back you go with that. So it certainly is something that's been in the forefront for a while. As a lifelong Missourian from Sikeston, as I'm always proud to say, I empathize with the concerns many of the landowners and other stakeholders have expressed throughout this grain belt proceedings. And as a former state legislator, I'm familiar with the pressures that come with doing your best to serve constituents in situations in which it is impossible to appease or meet the needs of everyone. One of the most challenging parts of being a commissioner here at the Missouri Public Service Commission is in getting used to the acronyms or the energy utility industry jargon. It is the challenge of continuously reminding myself that I and my colleagues around this table are charged with making decisions guided by the evidence presented in evidentiary hearings, expert testimony, and other filings. Unlike legislators, we can't create the law. We also can't dictate how companies run their businesses or untangle legal agreements we may not like. The PSC's decisions are limited to the confines of the authority granted to the PSC by the legislature and by the courts. Sometimes following the law and operating within the scope of the PSC's authority doesn't allow us to make choices that would address all of the concerns of some of our most vulnerable stakeholders. Although many of the issues we encounter in these cases are complex, the mandate for PSC commissioners is pretty simple. We do our best to make decisions that can be supported by evidence and that are permitted by regulations and laws. This frequently forces us to make tough, unpopular decisions. Having said all this, though, I concur with the chairman's remarks in granting Grain Belt CCN and allowing the project to proceed in 2 phases. Although I support staff's proposed conditions to which Grain Belt has agreed, I do not support the adoption of staff's proposed definition of material change. In the coming weeks, I know that we'll be finalizing the language for the official Grain Belt order, and I look forward to collaborating with my colleagues on getting to where we need to get to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's my position.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Olson.
You know, the first question that I asked and asked it over and over in the hearings was this amendment that's in front of us now, if it were defeated, would the original CCN go forward? Would they build the original line regardless of the impact of this amendment? And the answer I got time and time again was yes. The original line will go forward regardless of what happens with the outcome of this amendment. So that focuses the attention on what does this amendment do? Is it better for Missourians or is it worse for Missourians? And I think from a macro perspective, it's pretty easy to get to a place where we're looking at taking stranded power. We're looking at having national security implications. We're getting clean, cheaper energy to places that have higher demand. The state of Missouri is going to receive more power. There's going to be more connections. There's going to be more development around this line, around the nodes, that will ultimately move us in a direction where we are getting cleaner sources of energy for a better price than what we would if this amendment were not approved. From a macro perspective, all the things that you have said dealing with the tartan factors, I believe, exist and are correct. Now, having said that, there's a human element that comes into this that is the micro, not the macro. And that human element is the individual who's got to wake up every morning and have their coffee on their back porch and look at these lines and look at these poles and know that they've got generational farms that they want to hand down to their children that now have these poles and lines running across them. And that's hard. That's tough. History has shown that you can't stop progress. You know, the railroads were first and then the highways, and now we've got these transmission highways. We're trying to get this clean, cheap power to where it's needed most. But that's not going to help the individual who has to, you know, bear the burden and the brunt of this. And I felt like the company did not do a good job of explaining how they were going to mitigate this sacrifice, how they were going to better compensate for the landowner who has to deal with this. I thought the public hearings were pretty telling. I thought when we were hearing from the individuals who were going to have these poles and these lines run across their land, they were pretty clear about how they felt about it. And they were asking for our attention that this impact is going to happen. And so from a macro standpoint, I can make the argument all day long that this is the right thing to do for progress in the state of Missouri. From the micro standpoint, it gives me pause. And I have to ask myself, what would I want me to do if I were in their shoes? If it were my land that this was running across and I was the one that had to have my coffee and look at them, how would I want me to help protect and defend my rights and my compensation? And that's how I'm going to approach the next however long it takes us to get through these positions. I have some conditions that I feel very strongly about, that if they are not included in this order, I will have a hard time getting to a yes. I believe that we need to move in the direction of clean power. I believe that the environment is telling us every day that the longer we wait, the worse it's going to get. But I also think that Missouri has a rich history of landowner rights, and we need to represent and preserve and protect those the best that we can within the power that we have as a commission. So as we start to go through these positions, you're going to see me offer up and request and near demand some of these conditions be put in place on behalf of the landowners so that we can do our part, that if it were us and it were our property, we would feel that someone represented us in this discussion.
Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Commissioner Kolkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I have a question. One is, are we only talking about the CCN and the two phases? Or are we going to talk about the landowners?
I think why don't we just talk about the CCN like Commissioner Holzman, since he deferred his,
Yeah.
I know he has a lot of comments. Let's try to do that, and then we'll circle back around, and then we'll hit the next piece, which I think is in the order, is the conditions.
Okay, so I was in the legislature when grain belt was going on. And I don't think I was on the utilities committee when it came through there. However, everything I was hearing, I was not in favor of it because of it. I saw no benefit to Missouri. I mean, they were just going to put the poles here, and the power was going to go right on. So I'm with you on that. I had a hard time even thinking about supporting that. Then coming back, and now that they're currently going to drop 500 megawatts here. Okay, then now we're finally getting somewhere. But now we're going to, if we approve this, go to 2,500. This is a 5,000 megawatt line. Half of it's going to be dropped here in Missouri, which is going to be a big benefit to Missouri. At that point, that's what got me on board in saying, okay, this is benefit to Missourians because of getting half of this power. With all the coal power plants being shut down, we're going to have to replace it with something. And whether this is what we need to do, I'm not there. We haven't researched that. However, we're going to need to backfill it with something. We're not building enough new power plants to offset all the coal-fired that are being shuttered and put out of business. 2 phases. I don't have a problem with the 2 phases. The second phase, I'm not sure has any effect on Missouri at all, a benefit to Missouri. So I'm not saying why do we care if it goes on from here. Where I do see the benefit is if they can transport more power on past us, it will help lower the cost of electricity coming here. That's the benefit I see. Now, as far as helping them pay for that, I see no benefit to Missouri. So I don't have a problem at all with building this in 2 phases. So there we go there. Local benefit. I mean, we're going to get a lot of local benefit out of this. I mean, they're going to need concrete, they're going to need rock, they're going to need food, they're going to need housing, they're going to need, mobile home setups, a mobile park, RV park setups to house these people. I think it's going to be hard to dictate how many people from Missouri have to be employed. I really do. I mean, these are skilled laborers. And I don't know that we have that many skilled laborers in this arena to build this line. So Commissioner Coleman, it was very well spoken on our challenge here and the evidence that was presented in this case and the tough decisions we have. And we can't write what we want to in law. We have to abide by the law. I'm also sympathetic with Commissioner Holzman with the landowners. I want to make sure the landowners in this Tiger connection are taken care of and taken care of properly. So that's kind of where I am in that, if I hit what you were asking for.
That's great. Thank you. Commissioner Hahn.
Thank you. First, I just want to say that this is a really interesting case to be my first case here on the commission. So I appreciate
Deep into the pool.
I appreciate all the staff that went into building the case. I appreciate all the advisors and the technical advisors that have helped me formulate, my thoughts for today. And then I really appreciate my fellow commissioners, and having this discussion, in this format and, helping me think through some of these really, really difficult issues. I think that this is a particularly difficult case because, as Chairman Roop noted, We're 9 years in the making, and here we are again. And the first time that this happened, I was actually a staffer in the Missouri Senate and never anticipated being at this table. And so it is really interesting, just from my perspective, to have saw it now and watched it for 9 years, and certainly think about it differently over that time period. As I started to sit down and evaluate the evidence, I can see a lot of the points that have already been brought up. There's really great arguments for grid resiliency, for national security interests. You know, I really appreciate and share a lot of the same views on landowner you know, conditions or thoughts about you know, how, if I were the person that this was going across my land, how would I feel about it? And so in trying to evaluate the evidence put forward in this case, which is exactly, you know, how I approached it, I did actually sit down and go through the Tartan factors myself and evaluated each of those like we all did. And I, if it's all right with my fellow commissioners, just like to walk through those and to talk through kind of the evidence as I put forward, or as the staff and the parties put forward in the case, and just talk through some of those pros and cons. So as we've already talked about, this would in fact be a new certificate, though it is in a way an amendment to for an existing certificate, but it would be a new certificate. And so in figuring out if we should grant a new certificate, we have to figure out if this is either convenient or necessary for the public interest. And though it's not required to use the Tartan factors, I know we've talked about them before. The chairman first mentioned them. That's the way I kind of evaluated whether or not this application was convenient or necessary for the public interest. So that first, the 5 are the need. The applicant has to be qualified. They have to have the financial ability. It has to be economically feasible, and it has to promote the public interest. So breaking those down individually, there has to be a need. In this particular case, staff did not necessarily find need or assess need in this particular case. Rather, staff relied on the commission finding from 2016 in a previous case where that commission found that the project was needed, economically feasible, and not detrimental to the public interest. And that was over staff's objection in that case. Need was also found by the commission previously regarding the ability to deliver power to MISO South and TVA through the Tiger connection from and to those outside of the state of Missouri. But as a commissioner here on the Missouri Public Service Commission, I don't feel as though I represent ratepayers or citizens outside the state of Missouri. So I am generally concerned about constructing a line based on need that are not residents of the state of Missouri. Also on the need factor, MEC, or what I hear was Mudgmuck, did testify that they have 200 megawatts under contract of a 5,000 megawatt line. Currently, under the existing CCN, 300 megawatts would be coming to Missouri that have still not been contracted for. So under this proposal, or the amendment, there would be even 2,000 more megawatts uncontracted if this request were to be approved. So at this point, I struggle with demonstrating a need and a benefit to Missouri customers based upon the fact that there is power still available that hasn't been contracted. And I do feel like it was the company's burden to prove that there is a need. And I do think I understand the large consumer's perspective that if you build it, they will come. But that, I don't feel like the evidence presented was firm enough to demonstrate need as far as additional capacity. Though I do also on the other side see that this increase in capacity coming to Missouri is in line with what the General Assembly passed in House Bill 2005. Clearly, the General Assembly had an intention to want to provide more power to the state of Missouri through these merchant lines. The following two factors were undisputed, and that is that the applicant has to be qualified to provide the service and they have to have the financial ability to provide the service. Because those were undisputed, I find that those criteria were met. The last two factors, that the proposal has to be economically feasible. In this particular case, need and feasibility did kind of run together a little bit. I found that the company failed to provide evidence that would enable the staff to confirm whether the projected revenues of the project are reasonable in regard to phasing. So staff relied on the commission's previous finding from the 2016 case that the economic feasibility of the project is dependent upon sales to PJM, which was the original line. As a result, there's really no evidence or analysis to support the phases separately. Staff is concerned that if phasing is approved, phase 2 may never be completed. Thus, the project would never be able to sell to PJM, which then also brings Tartan Factor 1 and this based on need and 4 economic feasibility into question. Staff did acknowledge that if prices in MISO are sufficient to support the cost of phase 1, then it may be feasible regardless of prices in PJM. But this is unknown. And Grain Belt did not provide evidence of the price differential in this case, and that is their burden to prove. In the meantime, the cost for the project has doubled from just over $2 billion to now anywhere between $4.95 to $5.7 billion. Grain Belt has also not signed any interconnection agreement at this point with either MISO or PJM, which does further call into question this project. The other component, the one that I probably struggle with the most on economic feasibility, is the risk, because this is a merchant line, is assumed to be on the owner of the project, Grain Belt Invenergy. The heartburn I have is that Grain Belt or Invenergy recently filed the formal complaint with FERC against MISO to basically require the RTOs to pay for the benefits of this transmission line and other merchant HVDC projects. And while RTOs are not currently required to pay for these lines, I'd be concerned that if this were to be approved and it wasn't economically feasible for Invenergy to construct and operate this line, they will eventually shift the cost to the RTOs, and then Missouri utilities and ratepayers will end up absorbing the cost. So economic feasibility, I definitely have some concerns about. The last one on public interest, the benefits of the line were alleged to be economic, fiscal, and employment benefits. Sitting through the case and reading through a large amount of the testimony presented, this was primarily put forward by Mr. Repsher and the Loomis study. And the Loomis study is the one that said that this line would create 5,747 total construction jobs and 104 permanent Missouri jobs. When we asked what kinds of jobs are the permanent jobs, it was basically vegetation management. Also, all of these jobs were assumed to be 100% Missouri residents. So I'm not sure there was ever any analysis of, does Missouri have 5,747 workers that could be employed by Grainbelt's line, and is that even practical? So I find that the assumption relied upon by the study was flawed from the beginning, but that was their testimony. On the economic benefits, we know that the only contract signed by MEC so far was a first mover deal, to which Grainbelt testified that all of their contracts would be market price. So I find it difficult to understand, if they are market price, how it would further reduce energy costs. And then also, if their petition to MISO is approved, Missouri ratepayers could end up paying for the line, which certainly would not reduce energy costs. I do find that the arguments for the benefits of the project, again, are grid resiliency and national security. But we have treated this line, or at least it seems like I've heard about this line, like it's going to provide power to the entire state of Missouri, which I struggle with because this application only includes one converter station. So if it's going to try to provide more power across the state of Missouri, it seems as though the line would need more than one converter station to make it accessible, to make the grid here in Missouri more reliable and more resilient. And then, as this is the last factor on promoting the public interest, landowners certainly don't feel that this is beneficial to them. And then adding several new counties and landowners to this line doesn't seem to make it better at this point. So I'm struggling with the issues presented in the case, answering whether it's necessary or convenient for the public interest on relocating the single converter station, phasing it, and adding the Tiger connector. Certainly, I'd be interested in trying to find ways to make it easier for landowners to be compensated, to feel like their concerns were heard, and to feel understood with such a project like this. So I look forward to the continued discussion on conditions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for well thought out and articulate thoughts. Before we head on, I'll just follow up with a couple things that were said. Maida, I think you did a great job on articulating the difficult nature of what we were charged to do with here. You know, this is a site certificate line. I mean, we're allowing the siting for this line. This is not an area certificate. This is not a rate making certificate and stuff. And so, we have to stick with the rules of what we have, and sometimes that limits us on what we can do. Maida, I thought you really had good comments that was there. It is very tough decision that is there. And Commissioner Holzman, you spoke eloquently on the difficulties facing the landowners. I mean, this has been difficult to deal with from our perspective, but I can imagine what it's like been for 9 years of dealing with this. And the one positive thing I see is either we build it or we don't. And it's the last inning of the ninth game of the thing. Boom, we're going to either do this or not. And I really don't want to see this thing ever again. And I don't want to see this coming back regardless of how it turns out. So there is some end in sight, but 9 years of dealing with this from an emotional standpoint, from a landowner, those that have been contributing towards the defense of their position for legal fees, This has been a difficult task for them that was there. Commissioner Kolkmeyer, I think you touched on something that I did not, about the potential for avoiding generation. You know, we're on two resource advisories right now, and SBP and MISO, looking at potential of needing new generation. Will this offset that? It could, some to that nature, but you know, maybe not enough. And you know, and a new gas plant being built might still have to happen. But you know, potential of accessing additional wind energy from different geographic regions, and tying them into potentially two different RTOs might get us to where we can delay a generation build if we have to. That was something you touched on that I had not. And Commissioner Hahn, I mean, very eloquently, you've done your homework, and internally you nailed everything that I was struggling with, that eventually I was able to overcome. But all of the points that you raised were all ones that I truly had to pause and work through. And there was, testimony on, on the contracts for power and things of that nature, of which I was able to come to a different conclusion based, some of it on highly confidential testimony that we can't speak of here and stuff, and my experience of dealing with these interconnection transmission lines being built in the SBP footprint and stuff. But everything that you identified that you're struggling with, I concur. I struggle with all those points as well, and we might not end up on the same page, but it was for your first one out of the gate. You did your homework, and you identified all the struggling points that I also struggled with. So that being said, Judge, I think we kind of cleared through that first piece. The second thing you had asked us to talk about was any modifications, conditions to landowners or compensation packages and things of that nature. I think we touched on the financing of the phase in two. I think all of us kind of touched on that we were with our comments. The landowner protocols, just in general. I know that there's probably going to be more robust discussion after my comments here, but in general, I am in favor of the Missouri Landowner Alliance's proposal that the commission does direct grain belt to offer the landowners on the Tiger Connector the option of either accepting the original proposal of 110% plus a per mile plus per structure payments, or the 150% of the fair market. So I am in favor of that position. And I believe that the company has agreed to the additional party conditions, and then the ones that they had agreed to, should be included as well. But I also, I think it might have been Commissioner Kolkmeyer, no, it was Commissioner Coleman, identified staff's recommendation on the changes to material change. I would concur with Commissioner Coleman. I am not in favor of the staff's proposed modification to the definition of material change that was there. So I'll just kind of leave it at that, and we'll kind of head on around again. So Commissioner Coleman, do you want to add any thoughts to any of the conditions or stipulations?
I would just say, first let me address Commissioner Hahn. And just as you said, Mr. Chairman, this has not been an easy case for any of us, because there's so much that, our job consists of that we have to take into consideration. And as I noted, that I am a proud native of Sikeston, Missouri. I grew up across the road from a cornfield, one in front of my house, and a cow pasture on the side of my house. So certainly, I came to the legislature in the House of Representatives. I was the first African American from the city of St. Louis ever to be appointed to the Agriculture Committee. And so I went there with a great understanding of how important our farmers are, our landowners, and so this is something that we're all struggling with. as we deal with these issues concerning grain belt, because we won't. It would be nice if everything could be hunky dory, but it's not when it comes down to what the decisions are that we have to make. Relative to your comment, Commission Chairman, I also support the proposed compensation package offered to the Tiger Connector landowners. And to a great extent, I think we're in agreement with each other's positions. I definitely don't want to belabor my earlier remarks or repeat what's been said. So I'll just let Commissioner Holtzman share his thoughts at this time.
Well, just to put a little bit of structure to this, I'm looking at a number of questions, and I know that Commissioner Hahn has some points as well. So, as opposed to me laying out, well, actually, it's up to you, Mr. Chairman. Would you rather have me lay out each one of my conditions under this discussion, or do you want to break it up into where that condition would go into? So, for example, right now we're on landowner compensation. Next, we would have landowner concerns, and then we would go to landowner complaints regarding damage and remediation, and then we have regarding employment of Missourians, and then finally relating to project siting. Do you want all of my conditions now, or do you want to go question by question?
That might be a little too much to keep straight. So
do you want to go question by question?
Let's go question by question, and then maybe throw one out. We'll kick it. Commissioner Kolkmeyer, we'll continue on, and then Commissioner Hahn. And then at that point, maybe we'll just have a free for all, an open discussion without going around. But I want to give the two that follow you the opportunity to do that. And then why don't you kick off one? And
so let me just give a real quick preamble to these conditions. This is again another time where the legislature training in me was hard to shutter, because for 14 years as a legislator, if I could think it, we could write it, we could do it, and I got told no a lot on these discussions, for rightly so, because we're coloring inside lines and we're playing inside a sandbox that the legislature constructed for us, and we have to maintain what is an authoritative capability of this commission. And so there are things that I would have liked to have done that are not going to be possible. So I can guarantee you the things that I'm offering today are what I believe can be done. Now, having said that, there's going to be some complication here. It's going to take some time to take what I've sort of the direction I want to go in and suss it out to get it into an order. So I fully understand that these are general, and we'll have to figure out a way to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish, and that won't happen here today. So I would suspect that we may even need another discussion once we're done here, once we've been able to take the ideas and turn them into actual language and then talk about it again. So
the judge can't crawl in your head and just create an order?
No. You
haven't figured out how to do that yet?
All right. So with that being said, the first one I want to talk about is additional line and services. The transmission line easement agreement states that the easement may also be used for installation, operation, and maintenance of fiber optic cable and other equipment needed for transmission and communications to or by third parties. Now, the company witness affirmed that landowners will not be further compensated for that access. And if new services are being provided, especially by a third party using the easement, it does not seem right that landowners are not compensated for the additional access. I would encourage the company to consider providing additional compensation if the company elects to utilize the easement for third-party telecommunications or broadband purposes, and if we are able to construct an order compelling such, I would be in favor of that.
Commissioner Kolkmeyer, you want general comments, and then if you want to
Since that one was first on the table, I don't have a problem with that one. if they're gonna tie other things to that, the landowner should be compensated. Here again, like I said a while ago, I want to make sure that the landowners are compensated here. And I think the option both ways, either way, the 150 or the one time and the pole attachment, or pole position, I think they should have the option to choose. That I don't think that's out of too much to ask to let the landowner choose which way they want to go. The material change, I'm not in favor of the staff's position there. So I'm not there. I want to go back to Commissioner Hans about the converter station, something that I've had a big question in my mind and something that I've talked to my advisor about more than once. In the population of Missouri is on each side, the east and the west side, and this converter station is going to be put right in the middle. Now I realize that will be hooked to the grid, but however, if you're going to take a large amount of power off, why is it in the middle? Why isn't it there one on the west side and one on the east side? But here again, I'm not an engineer and I'm not, Invenergy here telling them how to run their business. But that has been a big concern of mine of here, why there's only one. So I think I've hit the three things that I wanted to hit this go around. Unless you.
That's great.
Okay.
Make sure you had your opportunity.
Yep. Thank you.
On Commissioner Holzman's proposal on telecommunications easement, if you recall from the hearing, Mr. Chandler is the one that spoke about the telecommunications easement and that, exhibit KC4. I can't remember exactly the numbers, but we asked several questions relating to, do you plan to lease it? Do you plan to, are you going to sell it? And I think I recall the response generally being, we want to use it for rural broadband expansion at some point. Well, I think if they're going to use it for these easements for more than one purpose, I'm really in support of, additional compensation for using that easement for more than one purpose, especially if they're selling or leasing to another entity, where maybe Grain Belt is not the only one accessing that easement. Maybe it's a different company. So I support the idea of allowing additional compensation for that. One of the party's primary goals, the Farm Bureau, is rural broadband expansion. If this line is going to traverse properties that the landowners absolutely do not want them there, I think at least we could do our best for compensating the landowners for that telecommunications easement, and hopefully encourage the company to actually use that fiber for rural broadband to help meet some of those other policy goals. So I would be in support of trying to encourage something for that easement.
All right. So I understand the desire, and I understand that that if you're granting someone the ability to, or you're selling them your access to the land, and then they go and utilize it for something additional to create an additional revenue stream. I understand the desire to have the landowner to benefit. I'm just going to need to be shown how we can possibly do that, because this is a siting certificate. We don't have control over rates. We don't have control. It goes to FERC for some of those things. And I don't want to be the Debbie Downer on the commission. I would need to see how, I would need to see the language. I would need to see how we even can potentially get there to have the authority to to construct that. So in spirit,
Well, let me keep going if you don't mind on compensation, because that was just one
Yeah.
component.
No, not at all.
it's free for all. I'm open for a
Yep.
free for all. So
Yes.
chime
Okay.
in, just let the quorum go there.
So there was a lot of conversation in the hearing about compensation. Currently, landowners are offered basically two options. They're offered a fixed sum or an annuity. And under the fixed sum, Grainbelt has their standard payment schedule, which is 20% upfront, 10% in 3 years, and the balance, which is 70% 3 years later. They also have an annuity, which it seems to be an alternative payment schedule, which is 5% for the first annual payment and then 2% thereafter for as long as the line's in existence. I would really like to look at some additional payment options for landowners, of allowing a fixed sum upfront. So currently, they have the fixed sum, only it's spread out over 6 or 7 years. I'd like to allow the landowners to have that full amount up front. And then also I would, in theory, like to allow landowners to change their payment options if that's possible. So they may initially choose an annuity payment, but perhaps their financial conditions change. They think about things differently with the construction of the line, and they actually just want the fixed sum up front or to change to the fixed sum. So long as it doesn't exceed whatever we all decide on compensation overall, which is kind of where I want to go next. I would like to allow landowners on the Tiger Connector to choose between the compensation in House Bill 2005, which is 150% of fair market value, or option 2, 110% of fair market value plus structure payments. I know there was some discussion about there's no difference currently for those on the main line in structure payments between monopoles and lattice structures. So I'd like to look at some different payment option for lattice structures versus monopoles, as lattice structures are larger than monopoles. I remember from testimony that there is potentially a discussion of 18,000 per lattice structure and 6,000 for monopoles. So one, I'd like to allow, as chairman, you indicated your support for for allowing 110% or 150%. But on the 110% for structure payments, I'd like to look at some alternative structure payment options. And I'm curious if we can do this, but if we can try to index those structure payments by CPI from the effective date of the order. Just curious, because materials, this has been 9 years in the making. So if there is going to be a structure built within maybe 7 years from now, chances are $6,000 today is not what it will be 6 years from now. So I'd like to think about how we can continue to compensate the landowners for those structures that would be appropriate at the time that they're paid for them.
So you wanting to apply a CPI index to those, so to the point of when they were built, and have any difference be added, paid back? So you're not asking for a CPI moving forward?
No, because the 110 and 150% would be based on the fair market value. So whatever that fair market value is. But I am asking where it is a fixed amount, 6,000 or 18,000 or whatever that dollar amount is for those structures to change going forward.
To a point certain of
Yes.
construction?
Yes, to the point of construction.
I would support that for sure. The changing options is potentially a little more problematic just from the standpoint of, I think they should be able to do it. I would like to see them be able to do it. But does the annuity run with the land, or does the annuity run with the signature of the easement? Because, you know, whoever buys that land is then going to have the obstructions. If you had a scenario where a landowner had signed an easement and they were in annuity and they knew they were going to move for whatever reason, and then they changed to, you know, an upfront cost, and they took that money and then they sold the property and the annuity was lost on the property, that doesn't seem like it would be, you know, equitable for the new buyer. So that would be a little bit of a complication to work out. Not saying that I don't think that they shouldn't be able to change, I do, but
That option would not exist for the people that took the fixed sum anyway.
that's true. That's true.
Whether the fixed sum was over 7 years or fixed sum up front.
If you decided to go from a fixed sum to an annuity and you'd taken an amount, maybe you could delta the difference of what has already been taken out versus what you would get the balance of it.
Yeah. There may be scenarios where you can't go from one option to the other. The one that's just the plainest to me is going from option one to from a fixed sum to fixed sum all up front. That's the one that to me seems the easiest to do, or to go from an annuity to a fixed sum up front. You can calculate how much might have been paid out on that annuity so far to calculate all of the amount, the remaining balance that needs to be paid. We can continue thinking about what can be in our lane, what options might be available to us.
Because like the chairman said, I ran up against a lot of FERC's decision on rate design. A lot of the ideas I had would have gotten us into rate design, because I would like to see ongoing increases in ownership potentialities and all that. And we just don't have those tools available to us for this. So, Judge, can we take some time to evaluate?
Absolutely. You have
So,
all the time you need.
yeah, so, and Commissioner Coleman, Commissioner Kolkmeyer, jump in here whenever you want. I'm assuming you have more than these.
I do,
Yeah, okay.
yes.
So,
I do.
I think I said this before, and I'll just say it again. I want the landowners to have options.
and I echo that. I think the changing back and forth from the one option to the other, I just see that being made hugely problematic. Just trying to keep track. Oh, I chose this option, and then now I want to switch this one, and then you have to recalculate everything. So that one is causes me more concern than anything else that you have articulated. But the other option, in the CPI, I see what you're saying with the cost of construction and the delay. And again, I'll caveat, I would just need to see the language and ensure that we can accomplish what it is, but I understand where you're going there. You had a third one in there?
Basically I had an additional payment option, which was the full amount up front. The changing options, which you've already covered, and then compensation overall on 150% or 110% with structure payments. The one you might be missing is I was hoping to look at different structure payments based on the type of structure, if we could do that. Monopoles.
I thought there was testimony about that.
There was
So,
about that, but it's not from my understanding, on the original CCN, there is not a difference in structure payments for lattice structures.
I think it was just the.
So I'd like to see if we can reevaluate that.
Reevaluate the original.
No,
CCN
reevaluate looking at structure payments for the Tiger
for the
connector.
Tiger.
A monopole versus a lattice that takes up a lot
Yeah,
of land, but one to the other. So
I mean, I am wholeheartedly in favor of exploring all of those options to the best of our ability. And as Commissioner Holzman says, if we stay in the lane of which we have to moderate. The overall fear I have is that we provide false hope to landowners and provide them things of which are questionable legality that might easily get thrown out in court and throw this down. So just saying that with a caveat, and this has been going on for 9 years. And to do that. The other thing too is, Judge, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know of any other transmission CCNs and ATXI or any of the others that have, landowner compensation provisions. It's similar to this. So, I mean, I know we are, maybe there's some small ones, but I know that we're really heading into uncharted territory, with this. So I just wanted to put that out there, but more than happy to look at all of those options. And even those I have reservations on, I'll give it the good look-see and be open to be convinced on those. But
I agree with you completely that we do not want to give false hope. And that is why I'm not bringing forward some of the ideas that I had.
you should have seen what I really had.
Yeah, no, really. But having said that, I also think we owe it to them to try to see how far we can push the envelope before we, push it too far.
Fair enough.
So,
So they're
Mr. Chairman,
yeah, go ahead, Mayor.
I just wanted to note, just to remind folks of some of the comments I made originally. And while I appreciate these compensation recommendations, I'm just sure they're within the scope of the PSC's authority, particularly as it pertains to the telecommunication easement, and requiring that landowners have all of the payment distribution options. Administratively, I think implementing all of those payment options could be confusing for some landowners. But considering that the judge has said that we've got time to do this, that gives us some time to confer with legal counsel to get some clarity about what conditions we can legally impose. So, Commissioner Holzman, I appreciate your last comment about, we can kind of throw stuff out there, see what can be done, but you don't want to get hopes up. But certainly, I think that having more time to work through this and to collaborate and determine what else we might be able to do to make this work within our administrative capacity is a good thing. So I'm looking forward to more conversation on this.
Yeah, and thank you, Commissioner Coleman. You brought up the broadband piece, and that was the other piece I didn't comment on. It's concerning how we could possibly do that. Maybe it's just we can't compensate you. Maybe it comes down we can't legally compensate you or allow you to share in the revenues, but God forbid, at least give them free internet, or something. I mean, to share on it, whatever we can possibly do. But yeah, I think it'll be difficult to get there on the telecommunications piece of.
it's also a difference between being able to compel and being able to recommend.
Yeah, true.
And so, I'd like to find out if we can compel, and absent that authority, figure out a way to set forth some of these more, potentially I don't want to call them aggressive, but you know,
We always have the right when, if if this gets approved and it gets built and they file it FERC, we can always file comments in that FERC case, that this was the intention of the commission when we granted this, is noted in this order that we recommended. And so FERC can do what they want, and they can completely ignore our recommendations, but it is something that we could always follow up with.
Right. And also there's nothing to say that just because the company did not explicitly express that they wouldn't or would not do something, that they won't listen to what we're saying and adopt a position that we've asked them to take voluntarily. Not to say that they will.
Yeah, I mean, they voluntarily said they would honor the bill and stuff.
I mean, the company wants to have a good relationship with their landowners, and I think that they made that clear in the hearing. Now we're just going to try to put some guardrails around what that looks like to make sure that that is followed through on. So
Yeah, but go ahead. Ryan.
having said that, okay, so in along those lines, the company should be required to make all impacted landowners aware of the Office of the Ombudsman for property rights, as well as provide a website and information on how to contact that office. Now, that office was established in response to the Supreme Court's decision regarding eminent domain in the Kelo case. A task force on eminent domain was formed to analyze Missouri laws regarding the use of eminent domain and to issue recommendations that would better protect the rights of property owners when the use of eminent domain is being considered. After that, the legislature created the Office of the Ombudsman for property rights and directed it to document the use of eminent domain and any issues associated with its use and provide an annual report to the General Assembly. The office was also charged with assisting citizens by providing guidance, which shall not constitute legal advice, to individuals seeking information regarding condemnation process and procedures. So given the issues here at hand, it seems only fitting that the landowners are made aware of this state resource to help guide their decision making. So I'd like to see that included. I have a couple more conditions here. I want to stress the importance of the company complying with the provisions found in the Missouri Landowner Protocols, Code of Conduct, and Agricultural Impact Mitigation Protocols, and make sure that the order is absolutely clear that the company must follow those protocols. In the hearing, I heard the company say that they were aware of them and they recognized them, but I did not hear the company say that they were abiding by them. And I would like for them to abide by them. So I want the order to include a statement regarding what recourse is available to landowners should they experience a violation of the Missouri Landowner Protocols, Code of Conduct, or Agricultural Impact Mitigation Protocols. The order should make clear that an impacted landowner may bring a complaint before the commission if the company fails to address the violations in accordance with these protocols.
So you're just making clear that they know, or you're not outlining any remedies. And
well, one remedy would be to file a complaint before the commission. That would be that an impacted landowner could file something in front of us. Now, to the extent of what we can do to enforce the protocols, that's less clear.
yeah, because I mean, that would be the concern I would have, is if they file a complaint with us and we're neutered to do anything. What is?
Well, the first item is to make sure that the company must follow the protocols. Right. That's, we can clearly state.
Yeah,
that.
no, I'm fine there.
And then, all ratepayers in our authority have the ability to file a complaint. I think that this just spells out that, we would.
So we have the ability to go after civil penalties?
Yes,
We do.
for violations of laws, rules, regulations, or commission orders.
And let's say there's a financial civil penalty. Where does the money go?
It goes to the public school fund.
Public school. Is that constitutional?
Yes.
Good answer.
So
Fines collection.
remedies would go to the public.
So that,
We're gonna give our lawyers
yeah.
a lot of work
Yeah.
over the next, dealing with this, because there's a lot here. You
Okay.
scratch, it's like you.
So the
it's a
ombudsman-
layer of an onion.
Does anybody have any problem with informing the landowners of the ombudsman's office?
And I don't have any problem with providing them the information that, like you said, yeah, so.
Okay.
I would maybe put in somewhere like how, because sometimes people bury it on page 57 of their website, you know, I mean, maybe a direct mail piece or something so that it is actually there or something, but yeah, we can talk about that later.
Yeah, and we're not extending any additional, we're just communicating what's
Right,
available.
right.
As you're talking about land, there was testimony from Greenbelt in the hearing that, for crop compensate, basically if the farmer's crop or the landowner's crop is destroyed or harmed, Greenbelt will repair or pay at Greenbelt's option for the damage. But I'd like to think about that maybe a little bit differently, as see if it's possible for us to give the landowner potentially the option. If it's a crop that's destroyed, you know, is it possible to allow the landowner to choose repair or payment? I think it's pretty hard to repair a crop, or if there's, you know, ruts that are put in the farmer's land, to allow some kind of communication, the landowner to be able to dictate whether they want repaired or paid for the damage on their land. So maybe just thinking about it differently, instead of allowing Greenbelt to choose, potentially allowing the landowner to choose, if that's within the scope of our authority.
Yeah, I keynoted that in my notes during the hearing as well. With the concern of how was it worded in the order, and if there was, if the damage was done not on construction, if it was done on a routine maintenance, or they had to go out and fix it, and then the damage was, I had a note in there, I was concerned about how, you know, when would that trigger and would they be covered? And I agree, you can't fix a crop. I mean, if it's right before harvest time and they take it out, I mean,
Total loss.
it has to be financial compensated, but like, then you're gonna get into a, what is it? I mean, how much and stuff. And then if there's a disagreement, where does it go? So I don't know if we want to look at.
Or maybe there's a way to say, make the landowner whole, you know, whatever way that is. Because my guess is that Greenbelt's probably good at transmission lines, maybe less good at farming. So whatever the landowner's remedy is to make them whole is something that I'm interested in. So if there's a way to explore that further.
Financial, if it's ruts that are gonna impact the next season, would be different.
Yeah.
So, but I'm interested in exploring that as well. That was something but your overall basic ask though is to shift from Greenbelt's preference to the
Yeah, with the bigger picture of just trying to make the landowner whole.
right.
Yeah.
And I think there would have to be some level of expectations of, you could get someone that just hates Greenbelt and just wants them to do X, and so maybe if we were to tie it to, you know.
But I think there's probably a standard out there now, is there not? I mean,
I don't
as
know.
many high-powered lines are going across and pipelines and what have you, and this storm that came through, I mean, Evergy, I saw pictures where Evergy drove through fields and had to replace some big structures and what have you. Somehow those farmers are gonna have to be made whole for the damage that was done. And I'm sure there's some kind of process already in place
No.
by something.
We'll have to-
There's not.
Yeah. Well,
Okay, okay.
well, my next two conditions would speak a little bit to that. I'd like to see a process and a time frame requirements established that the company must adhere to when responding to landowner claims under the protocols. That could include establishing a set of parameters, protocols, guidelines for how the landowner claims are to be handled to ensure the company is responsive and timely. When the very first bill I ever wrote was the Easy Connection Act in 2007. And one of the problems we had there in that time is anybody who wanted to put solar panels on their house would apply to the utility company, and then the utility company would get back to them in 6 months and tell them, oh, we got your application. We'll talk to you again in another 6 months. And they would just kind of slow play that. So the Easy Connection Act, at the core of it, was you had 30 days to reply, and here are the things you must have in order, like an official electrician's, certification, all these things. And if you had all these things, then the utility company was going to accept your application. And I think about that, what was that, 16 years ago now, and it could definitely apply here, where the company could say, all right, landowner, I know we drove through your soybeans and we destroyed a bunch of stuff. Send us the bill, and in a year and a half from now, we'll take a look at it. And then the landowner would be left to have to get a lawyer. And then that's going to cost them money, and it may mitigate any of the money that they might have earned by doing it. And then consequently, they just tolerate it. And what I would like to see is some sort of process by which the landowner is assured that if damage happens and they submit, they're going to hear from somebody in 30 days, and they're going to have their problem resolved in 90, or something along those lines. I'd also like to encourage greater transparency and accountability by encouraging the company to disclose the budget line item or to designate a specific fund related to remediation of landowner impacts to demonstrate it has the immediate and available resources to address remediation and damaged landowner properties as a result of the company or its contractors. In order to further ensure transparency and accountability, I'd like to see some type of regular reporting with regard to the budget for these purposes, and a metric that would demonstrate the company's responsiveness to landowners and timeliness in remediating any damage. So essentially, I want to know that you've got the money to fix it. I want to know that you have a designated fund that you have created, that you're routing, revenue into to be established there, or at least the transparency to, on a consistent basis, demonstrate that you have that money there available. Because if we do the first part, which sets up the process and the time frame, then the company would then want to have the resources necessary sitting there in a rainy day fund to be able to ensure that within 90 days, proper payment will be made of the remediation. And I think that's only fair to the landowners to not have to chase the repairs, to know that if they're damaged, they're going to be made whole.
So I hear two things, or maybe they were two separate proposals, but I hear the first one being the more like the Bill of Rights type of, if you submit this, it's going to be paying, which sounds like great legislation. That might, if something we can't do, I think it sounds like the frameworks of a good piece of legislation. The second one causes me concern, because if they don't have money to pay the landowners, they have no business building a $7 billion, line and telling them to delineate a budget line and stuff. I don't see I understand where you're coming from. I don't necessarily see the need for it on that one, but again, open to.
We could, again, recommendations. If we can't compel them, which, we're deciding whether this can go forward or not. So on some level, I understand that FERC controls the rate making on this. And that's why I didn't say create a fund with $10 million in it that you're going to take 1% of all your revenue and dump it into. That's why we're not talking about that. But I don't think it's too much to ask the company to demonstrate its ability to remediate any damage that it or its contractors cause.
I think so. not to belabor the point, but I think that is kind of in purview of us granting the CCN, that we believe they have those funds to construct, they have the funds to make those payments, but I understand, and I'm open to any language, to reviewing any language.
Okay. That's about what I had, that I felt like we could safely try and accomplish.
Go ahead. I know you.
Have more.
Before we get into that, we've been going for an hour and 25 minutes. Does would anyone need a restroom break or a break or anything? Judge, I don't want to.
I think she's only got 3 left.
I don't have a lot left, but
Mark, can you find me a bottle of water someplace, please?
All right. Speak now, or we're going to continue going. All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
while it's on my mind, and before Commissioner Hahn presents again, I'd just like to mention this before I forget what I wanted to say, which includes that, well, no one can ever say we're not willing to think outside the box. That's for sure. But on a more serious note, I definitely appreciate all of the ideas that have been proposed in this discussion. Even if we're unable to order many of these conditions, this discussion has, I feel, put the company on notice about how we'd like to see them manage the landowner relations. In the coming weeks, we will get clarity on the scope of our authority and the feasibility of implementing some of these suggestions. So just want to say that before, I heard something else and then forgot what I intended to say the first time. So thank you, and I appreciate it.
Well timed, well timely, and well articulated. Yeah, I think we will be getting more clarity as as we continue to move through this process. And yeah, you're right, Commissioner. Right now we're posing, we're thinking, we're trying, and clarity is going to come, through lawyers, which I'm not a lawyer, and I did not stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So, all right, Commissioner Hahn, looks like
okay.
you'd like to go ahead.
In the hearing, actually, Commissioner Holzman inquired to one of the Greenbelt witnesses on if they take requests for co-locating lines within an existing utility right-of-way. And the response was that, yes, they believed that they did co-locate lines, but they couldn't think of any specific examples of where they had done so. So my request here is really to encourage the company to co-locate where possible, just to mitigate, again, impact to landowners.
And to expand that a little bit, I also was disappointed in their response to the micrositing. If you have a landowner that is willing to work with the company, unless there is a safety or engineering reason why it can't be on a certain portion of the land, that landowner should have some ability to communicate directly to the company where they would a preference. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be an authority, but it can be a preference on micrositing those poles. And oftentimes, if it can be co-located or it can run with the highway or run with a road or an existing easement, or piggybacked with existing lines, where it can be, it should be.
I remember the local public hearing where the gentleman wanted to move 50 feet.
Yeah.
And was just basically told, no, we can't.
Yeah, go pound sand.
Yeah, and it was, so I am in support of what you're trying to do there. And I think some of the issue too, Commissioner Hahn, is the co-directional siting sometimes is approached kind of more like the not wanting to run afoul or interfere or with existing, power, gas pipes, and that way. And would like it to, that's great. Yeah, obviously we don't want to do that, but also it should be looked at from the direction of, landowner implications. It's not, oh, hey, we can already go here, but we have to be worried about we're not going to be close to that. But if you look at it from the standpoint of which I think I'm hearing you say is put in there as well, the impact to the landowner as far as one of the criteria is not just the impact on.
And there's actual, like a landowner may have planted a hedgerow and have intentional trees for erosion or for different reasons, economic and valuable reasons why they did that. And as opposed to just, taking a map and drawing a line across it, maybe listen to, if they're willing to work with you and they're willing to sign an easement and they're willing to, be partners with you in this endeavor, then give them some partnership in this and let them help figure out where's the best place to put it. Unless there's a safety or an engineering reason not to do it. That's the only reason why I would say that the company would be able to say no.
They're going to say it's an engineering thing because they're going to have to pay the engineers to resurvey and redo that, and then it comes down to cost. So.
We heard plenty landowners saying that the company was not bendable on any easements. And
yeah, I'm sure a 50-foot move here means you have to move it up the line, and they're probably looking at it as we got to go back.
But they haven't built it yet.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
So now's the
I
time.
understand.
Also in the hearing, we heard about landowner notification. And in one of the schedules that's provided, or in the easement that's given to the landowners, they're only given 24 hours notice if Greenbelt or their contractors or employees are going to be on the landowner's property. But what the language actually says is 24 hours in advance of accessing the property for the first time for the purpose of constructing, modifying, or repairing facilities. I'm fine if it's a shorter time frame for a repair or
Emergency.
an emergency, but it seems like the company would know if they're going to be on your property for the first time more than 24 hours in advance, or at least I hope so for a multi-billion-dollar transmission line. They seem to ought to know where they're going to be in advance. So I'd appreciate if we could look at extending that a little bit longer if it's for the first time for construction purposes.
So make it
I'm
a more advanced notice to the landowners.
at least 7 days, give them a week. Okay, we plan to show up in a week to start, constructing these structures for the first time. It seems like they would know, or at least be able to know, okay, next week we'll probably be on this property or that property. So I don't think it'd be an unreasonable, task to notify them for the first time ahead of construction.
Maybe
Now,
72 hours. 24.
Yeah, and if it's a repair, they might know more than 24 hours in advance. I'm not sure. I know if it's an emergency, certainly that's a different situation. But just more notice generally is where I'm going here.
I would support that if possible.
Yeah. And then my last one, this is one that I struggle with because their testimony said that it would support 5,747 construction jobs. And it assumed that all of those jobs were held by Missouri residents. And then their calculation of benefits to Missouri included, like, for example, those 5,000 something people paying income tax on their income from those jobs and all of the benefits that go from spending that income here in Missouri. So I don't know if we can do this, but it seems like it would be great to require, you have to hire a certain amount of Missouri citizens for your project. I don't know if we can do that or how we could do that. Or if it's through, Missouri contract companies that exist in Missouri, or how that could potentially work. But it seems like if that's their assumption and their expert witness about how many jobs this creates, we should at least be able to do that and the company not find it completely objectionable if it's within our legal authority. I don't have a necessarily percent in mind, but that's where I'm going.
It's the spirit of your request is highly supported, I believe.
That might be a recommendation. though.
Yeah, that's.
It might be.
But I do, you're right. Come on, guys. 5,700 are all gonna be in Missouri. I mean, you guys are paying these consultants. I mean, get what you're paying.
I didn't-
I mean,
So that might be something we look into.
Is this tariff going to have any type of updates or reporting data to us as the construction is ongoing? Because we might not be able to say hire Missourians, but we might be able to say, give us a quarterly report of how many Missourians you hired.
public shame them.
I mean, no, not necessarily, but you know, just as far as and maybe not specifically to residency, but this has been going on for 7 to 9 years. You know, that we still don't have a pole in the ground, and it would be nice to have some sort of communication as to how it's going, when it's going. You know, some sort of reporting that lets us know progress is being made.
I don't think there's a legal thing that would keep us from asking for reports.
It seems like that might be a great way to calculate actual benefits and jobs created, construction jobs created by Missouri residents. Then
And
could
use
easily,
future lines.
absolutely.
So they come and say, 100% of the jobs will be Missourians. And we go, fire your consultant. Hire a different one. Sorry, I said it out loud.
You know, I don't. If not core, I don't want to be. I don't. In as much as I'm trying to defend the landowners, I'm also not trying to intentionally be overburdensome to the company for just the sake of.
No,
You know.
I don't believe you're.
I mean, I want this project to succeed. I want this project. I want us to look back on this in 10 years and say we did something here that moved the needle on many priorities, economic and environmental, that we want to do, and have the landowners feel like they were partners in doing this, and so they can take some pride and some ownership in the fact that they contributed to this effort. You know, in World War I, the government asked everybody to have victory gardens and to conserve and consume less meat for the war effort. And if you believe that climate change is a existential threat to humanity, then everybody's got to grab an oar here. And so on some level, what we're doing is going to have a needle moving impact on that discussion. And all I'm trying to do here is make sure that those landowners who are going to have both oars in their hands feel like they were compensated properly, and that the company cared about them, and that they were a partner in this and not just done to. And if we can accomplish that, then I think that we can both have a macro success and have everybody feel like they were part of it.
And if you don't believe that climate change is an existential threat, you can still enjoy the less expensive.
Right, there's an economic.
And a fair compensation package for your access and to lower energy costs for all Missourians. So. Anyone else have anything else that you would like the judge to articulately put into words?
I'm done.
Oh, wow.
Judge,
I'm done.
Judge, I feel for you, Judge.
Yeah, sorry, Judge.
Sounds like you have clarity on the first part of your order, but the second part of your order is, so if you could try to wrangle today's conversation into some semblance of a step-by-step, the proposal the various different ones so that we can start flushing out the legality. Can we do that? How would we do that? And at least give us a starting conversation so we can all have conversations with our own legal staff, and then with other staff on technical advisors. I think that's the only way we're gonna whittle this down. So however you want to format that, we're open. We just verbal diarrhea a lot all over your plate of work there. So
Are there any legal requirements for timing on any of this?
There is no operational law date on this. There's only requests.
all right. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Judge.
Is there anything that you want us to know or anything that we didn't cover or that you need clarification on?
I am sure that I will have questions for each of you along the process, but I will get started and we'll see how it goes.
All right, well, that will conclude today's case discussion. Marathon case, almost 2-hour case discussion on one case. I had two candies while we were there. That was how long it was. If you happen, for those that are listening, probably noticing a huge glaring omission in our agenda. We are not going to have the history of the PSC today because we knew this was going to. I know there's already people upset. So we just figured this would take a long time. We didn't want to do it. So we're going to come back next week with the history of the PSC. But I do want to point out one thing. We started doing the history of the PSC, and that is when we started to get requests to live stream this thing again. I think the listening public is enthralled with the history of some of the commissioners and stuff. Now, I know there's correlation and causation. I'm not saying, I'm just pointing out the two interesting tidbits there. So let's finish this up here with scheduling. Wednesday, August 2nd, we have our agenda at 10:15. Thursday, August 10th, we have our agenda at noon. Thursday, August 10th through Friday, August 11th, we have an evidentiary hearing in WR 2023-0006. That is Confluence Rivers Utility Operating Company's request for an authority to implement a general rate increase for water service and sewer provided Missouri service areas. That will be at the governor's office building, the PSC headquarters, room 310 at 9 a.m. with Judge Hatcher. We're going to continue that same hearing the following week on the 15th through the 17th of August. Same place, same time. Then Thursday, August 17th, agenda at 10:15. Wednesday, August 23rd, agenda at 10:15. Commissioners, anything else before the good of the commission before we adjourn?
Good job running the
Great.
meeting.
Nope. Thank you guys for
Thank
well thought out, articulate thoughts. So that is all today. We will adjourn the Missouri Public Service Commission for today, July 26, 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.